Hello everyone and welcome back to another live stream here. And yeah, I really hope you guys are going to enjoy yourselves. That is the main part of a live stream, and that we have some cool interactions. So again, if you are new here, my name is Steven. I am an autopilot tester, not officially for Tesla, unfortunately, even though I wish. But if you are new here to the channel, please type new in the comments and I would love to say hi to you. Now, today I have three topics I want to talk about. The first one is Gigafactory Berlin, the opening that we had yesterday. And Elon was there, of course, so he gave a short speech and answered a few questions, one of which is FSD beta for Europe. Will it come? Yes or no? And the third one is, of course, a short update that I can give on the UNECE regulations. We'll keep that for later. I'm not going to reveal anything yet on that, but let's start with the Gigafactory Berlin. So yesterday, the first 30 Model Ys were delivered there. And Elon also, he said a couple of interesting things about the battery and about the roadmap of Tesla. So I briefly want to cover that. We're going to focus on the regulations here, but I just thought I would mention that he reiterated the fact and the same thing that he said when he did the earnings call for Q4. That is that there are no new vehicles going to come to production this year. They are still supply chain constrained. He still foresees some supply chain issues, but I found he was fairly positive that they would be able to tackle those. Now, Tesla doesn't have a demand problem. Almost all cars you can buy right now. There's a huge waiting time for them, even up to a year for a Model 3, depending on your configuration. The Model Ys seem to be doing okay. And now, of course, with Berlin coming online and doing the Model Ys first, probably we will see some gradual decrease on those waiting times. So that's one part. Now, he also said that in 2023, they will probably be battery constrained. And they might start with the Semi, and they might start with, or they might finish the technical production version of the Roadster. So for me, that also meant that the Roadster is probably not going to come in 2023. So that will be 2024. That means that we will be waiting for 7 years for that car. And I'm really looking forward to get my hands on mine, but it's a very long wait for that. But of course, as I said, Tesla doesn't have to make it because they can't produce it anyway in the volume that they need to, because they already have their hands full with Model 3 and Model Y, which are now their cash cows, of course. And then we have the Model S Plaid, the regular long-range Model S, the Model X Plaid, regular long-range Model X that still need to come to Europe, and where you can currently not put in an order. You can put in a reservation, you can configure it already, but you don't know when you will get it or when or how much it will cost. And that is for Europe, of course. They don't have a problem with demand, so they don't need to create that cheaper Model 2 car that some are talking about, or they also don't need to make the more expensive Roadster at the moment because they have their hands full already. When he gave a speech at the end, that was what he said, but also he asked the very important question: FSD beta for Europe. Is it coming, yes or no? And his first reaction was kind of funny to see, because he was like, what do you say? FSD beta, right. And he kind of laughed it away at first, but then he actually made a few remarks that I've been saying for a few years now. That is that he finally realizes that doing FSD in Europe is a lot harder than doing it in the US. We have all these tiny countries with different regulations. We have one governing body that prohibits basically everything until it is allowed, which is a different approach than in the US, where you can basically do whatever you want until they make a regulation about it. So that's a completely opposite approach that they are doing. But it's also important to note that for every country that we have our own governments with own legislation. We have different road signs in a lot of countries. Some are similar, some are the same, some are quite different. The traffic lights are different. They are also differently positioned here than compared to the US. In the US, you often have it in the middle of the intersection or on the opposite side of the intersection, where in Europe it's almost always right at the or before the intersection. And the cameras, depending on the traffic around you, sunlight conditions and all that kind of things, they have a hard time actually reading the right traffic lines. So even the traffic light recognition that we currently have, there's still quite a few bugs in it. I wouldn't trust it to just say, okay, I think it's green, go. So yeah, Stefan, good point. I don't think that Tesla has a localization strategy for FSD. No. What I personally think is that Tesla is aiming to, let's say, skip the whole level 2 tree and go straight for FSD, the level 4 version. We'll talk about the levels in just a minute, what it means. Again, I've said it a couple of times, but I think it's worth repeating that as well. So I think they want to skip it and just take what they have from the US and apply it direct, or try to apply it as much as possible to Europe. That's also what Elon kind of mentioned. He said, okay, we're doing quite okay with FSD beta in the US. And he thinks within 3 months, Elon time, of course, they will be able to show it to the regulators in Europe. The question is, how are they going to react to it? It is kind of difficult. What we know already is that the UNECE regulators, they are not interested in the data from the US because they deem the data or the situations in the US too different from Europe. So they say, okay, the roads are different, they are much wider. You can go right on red, for example, in some states. You can never do that in Europe, for example. So the differences are just too large, too big to use that data to prove that it would work in Europe. So Tesla really needs to have FSD beta internally testing and gathering data, which some say that they are already doing, but I have not seen or heard any actual proof of that, except from Green the Only, the hacker, who claimed that he found somebody in I believe it was the Ukraine or Lithuania, somewhere in that area, that was testing. But I don't know if that was really Tesla. I think they would test on the western part of Europe first. But anyway, they will need to do that to prove to the regulators that their system is safe. Now, after that, Elon was, again, I think too optimistic, saying, well, maybe we'll get FSD beta in Europe by the end of the year. Luckily, he made a disclaimer, pending regulatory approval. And I think we all know what that means. That means that it's going to take ages to get approved. HD maps would make finding the right traffic lights trivial. Yes, but again, the same with the same problems are going to be there as we have now with the speed sign recognition. Sorry. It's wrong in a lot of places and it changes. Right now in my area, a couple of streets around me, they are changing the traffic lights completely. So that needs to be updated immediately, needs to be downloaded to the cars immediately. There's always going to be the problem with maps and data or databases is they are always outdated. So you need some kind of real-time visualization and reading of the visualization and reading of the situation to actually apply to that. But anyway, let's talk about the levels. So what we last learned was that Mercedes was the first one to get the level 3 autonomous driving hands-off on the highway in Germany, on the Autobahn only, in specific conditions, like it needs to be more than 4 degrees, it needs to be daylight, there need to be well-marked lanes, it cannot change lanes on its own, so it's just staying in the same lane, and there cannot be any obstructions or changes in the road, such as toll booths, tunnels, that kind of thing. So it's really limited, but what you can do, it's up to 60 kilometers an hour. That has been approved, and it's basically a traffic jam assistant. This regulation was first brought to the table in February 2020 or in September 2019. So the UNECE, the R79 regulation, that basically crippled autopilot, that came into effect with 2019.16, the update, which was in June. And in September, they already started to propose a few changes. So it could be then, it could be in February, but it was approved in June of 2020. Only now in December was the first real car type approved by the KBA in Germany to allow it on the road. So it took 18 months between approving the regulation and getting a first type approval for a specific car. Now, what does that mean when we talk about FSD beta? Because FSD beta, if we look at it, it's not level 3 in itself. When we look at Mercedes, it was a real hands-off situation. You could take out your laptop, your cell phone. You could not take out, or you cannot take out a newspaper, for example, because your face still needs to be visible so that the car knows that there is still somebody in the driver's seat ready to take over. So you can be distracted, but you need to be ready to take over. And yes, that needs camera support. For mapping, it needs camera support, but also internally. So that is why the Model Ys are now getting the update. I already had it last week or 2 weeks ago, that the interior camera can be used. That is for basically reading the driver. And making sure that the driver is paying attention. In the US, you can already be penalized and go to the autopilot bench seat when you're not paying attention enough. I think it's only in FSD beta at the moment, but it is coming, and the interior camera is going to monitor the driver behavior for level 2 and periodic level 3 systems. Now let's get back to those different levels, but before we do that, there's still something I need to mention. So first of all, it took 18 months, but the actual procedure for approving it was not that hard. What I found is that what they did, first of all, was a risk assessment. Then they did a track test under limited conditions and under controlled conditions. But also they did a real world test. And the real world test was like only 50 hours of testing. So it's 1 work week. And about 1,500 kilometers or roughly 1,000 miles of driving with 3 vehicles to just validate the system. So that is definitely not that hard to get approved. It's more difficult to get the regulation turned into local legislation. And that is what is making it harder in Europe as well, because you have every different country that has its own legislation there. Level 3, what does it mean? So the SAE levels, if we look again at this chart, I've used it a couple of times. The SAE levels, they mean nothing in terms of capabilities. So what they do is they just talk about responsibilities. In an interview this week also, George Hotz from Comma AI, he said exactly the same. The capability or the responsibility follows the capability naturally. You're not going to take responsibility as a car company when you're not sure that your car can actually handle things. So there is definitely a connection between those two. However, FSD beta, one could argue, and I'm just going to go on a theoretical limb here, but one could argue that it is close to level 4 driving. It is close to hands-off driving. But Tesla is not taking any responsibility for the behavior of the car. So even in the US, even if it's really good and taking all those turns and intersections, going through narrow streets, winding roads, letting cars pass, going out of the way to let cars pass, all that kind of stuff is still level 2 because of the responsibility. When we go to level 3, it is, in my opinion, the hardest level to be able to tackle, because on level 3 you have a human-machine interface that needs to transition between the car's autonomous function, where you don't have to care about anything and you can play a game on your computer or on the center screen on the Tesla. You can take out your laptop, do some emailing, do some work, but you still need to be in the driver's seat at that point. And where you actually are, again, responsible, going back to level 2 or level 1 or level 0, of course, where you don't have any assistance functions. And there needs to be a transition time. You need to account for all the different purposes, all the different reasons why you need to transition. You can transition because it's the end of a road. It's a transition because something happens on the road and you need to manually take over. It's a transition because somebody got a heart attack and he can't do the transition. So you can't just terminate the system. There's like a flu gray zone where everything needs to be working still, even though it is technically not allowed to work under those conditions. And that makes it really hard for me to do level 3. And that is why I think that Tesla and maybe other manufacturers would love to just jump to level 4, where they can take the full responsibility. They have the capabilities to just take the hands off and say, okay, I'm not, or I'm fully responsible. The driver is not needed to provide any input anymore. And that is what we all dream of course, going into the back seat, sleeping on our way to work, or already starting to work while we're in a traffic jam. That is, of course, the ideal situation. And then even, level 5 is more, do we still need the steering wheel, yes or no? It's a little bit more complicated than that, the difference between the two, but with level 5 you basically don't need the steering wheel anymore because the car can do anything. So yeah, that's one thing. So let me check the chats here. Stefan, you are really active today, which is awesome. Thank you for your input here. I really appreciate that. Now, what are they doing in terms of the UNECE updates? So let me answer the question first. So FSD beta in Europe, is it coming this year? I don't think so. What I do think is that we will be getting some improvements and some welcome improvements. And maybe, just maybe, Tesla might still go for the same level 3 as what Mercedes has. But as I said, may jump to level 4 and do just the FSD part. But I think they have the capability to do it within the European regulations. They just need to see the value of it for us as drivers. Some changes that are being proposed at the moment. So the last meeting was in, I don't think, the March meeting still needs to happen. That's this week. But the last meeting was in January. And no real decisions were made there, but there was progress that was made. They are talking about the whole virtual emergency lane, and they are trying to regulate that as well. Now, there are two parts I found in different documents. There are two paths they are going on. The first one is creating an emergency lane ad hoc. So when the vehicle detects, that is basically what Mercedes is doing as well with the rearward pointing camera. If it detects an oncoming emergency vehicle, it will move out of the way. Now, in Germany, in Belgium, I believe in Switzerland also, and a couple of other countries that I don't really know by heart right now, the creation of the emergency lane, the virtual lane, is actually mandatory, and you need to do it when there's a traffic jam. So even if there's no oncoming emergency vehicle, you still need to clear the road for that vehicle. So that means that the vehicle has a lane that it can travel in at higher speeds, still in a safe manner, of course, because it's weaving in between cars. But compared to when you still need to move out of the way, it needs to slow down and then accelerate again, slow down. So the idea is to have a free lane where the emergency vehicle can drive as quickly as possible to assist the people that are in need. So that is definitely mandatory to do. So it kind of contradicts a little bit what they are trying to do with this document, and that is saying, okay, you need to create an emergency lane, and how do you do that? How far can you cross the line? Because right now, that is something that is not possible. Within the current regulations, the car needs to stay within the same lane. It cannot cross the line to just go over that line to create some room. Even though the Tesla is not doing that, but if they were doing it, they would be restricted to stay within the boundaries. So that is something that they are working on. So that's one of the proposed improvements. Another proposed improvement is that the car is able to leave the lane, well, not really leave it, but to weave around potholes or debris on the road and just cross the other lane marking for about 30 centimeters. That would be the maximum. Otherwise, it would need to use the blinker and then move over to another lane, because that becomes a lane change at that point instead of just an evasive maneuver. Again, a lot of text around how do we do this safely, because if I move 30 centimeters over to one side and in the lane next to me, the car is also moving 30 centimeters over, there's not a lot of room on Belgian roads or European roads by extension, so that would make it difficult. Hey Sam, welcome. Have you ever seen emergency lane in Miami? It means following the emergency vehicle so you can get traffic. Yeah, I've seen that happening too. I think in Germany I saw it once. And I have to say, because it was somebody I knew that was in the ambulance right before me, I was following it through there as well, even though legally I was not allowed to do that. But hey, if it's emergency and somebody you know is in an ambulance taking to the emergency room, you do what you have to do. Stefan, Elon was saying there were some improvements coming to AP in EU in the first half of 22. Yeah, I said even like the first quarter, like March or something. Everybody's asking him about it. I think he overestimated how quickly or how slowly, or underestimated how slowly everything is moving here, and he was hoping for approval in January for the unconfirmed lane change and the level 3 up to 120 kilometers an hour or 130. Elon has not commented on that yet, and we still have to wait to see what it means, but I think he was referring to that specific, to the unconfirmed lane change, because there is some news about that. Before we go there, before we go to the good news, what they are still talking about is automatic lane changes. They are debating about 5 seconds to 7 seconds for the actual lane change to start before it jerks you back into the lane. They are actually still debating about a 2-second window. I mean, come on, guys. It's ridiculous. So what we are facing is right now manual lane change. Driver initiates the procedure. The car needs to wait for at least 1 second before it starts moving. Then it has 2 to 4 seconds to start crossing the lane markings, and then it needs to complete that maneuver within 5 seconds. So the between 3 and 5 seconds would be between 3 and 7 seconds. That's what they are debating. It doesn't seem like a big improvement, but we would take anything that we could get. So yeah, that is definitely something that they are trying to improve, but it's going gradually. The good news is that they are, in fact, finally closing in on doing the deal with unconfirmed lane change. So what they are aiming for is to have a principal agreement with the GRVA, which is the task force or a subgroup within the UNECE that occupies itself with the regulations for what we are most interested in is the automatic lane keeping system, which is the autopilot, and by extension FSD. So they aiming for a principal agreement on level 3 up to 130 kilometers an hour and the unconfirmed lane change right now in March. So that is for the talks internally. Then they would aim for the final endorsement in May 2022. And if all goes well and there are no negative feedbacks anymore, then they would aim for official adoption in the WP. So that's the WP 29. So that's the overarching contract that those 59 countries have signed to all implement the same regulations in June. So by June, we could have the official approval to do unconfirmed lane change and to do level 3 up to 130 kilometers an hour on the Autobahn first, probably. But it will be highway only, of course, because city streets falls within FSD regulations and not so much within autopilot regulations. So yeah. Let's see. Richard, is Tesla allowed to use their interior camera to monitor the driver so that we at least do not have to nudge the wheel? Is that against European law? Yes, they are. There is, of course, concern for privacy regulation. There are many people that are not happy with that, but you have to opt in on it. So you actually give your approval for them to use the system. Of course, when you say I don't want to use the system, or you want to tape over the camera, which you can do, or have this little slider doors like you have on laptops sometimes for the webcam, you could do that, but the effect will be that you will not be able to use the autopilot functionality. So if you don't want to be filmed, you are not going to get the functionality. But that is, even within regulation, it is going to be mandated, because already within level 3, there are more stringent instructions to actually get the driver monitoring to a higher level than just nudging the steering wheel every now and then. So yeah, that's definitely something to consider. Now, what Tesla is saying is, and I believe them in that respect, is if they use it for autopilot, it's for driver monitoring. It's an onboard system and the data will not leave the car. Of course, if you get into an accident, Tesla will probably use that data against you to prove that you were not paying attention on a level 2 system, for example. So that's the downside of it. What we are seeing now in Europe, it's a little bit different. So we have gotten, or I at least have gotten, maybe you guys have had it too. We have an update and they basically ask for access to the interior cabin camera, not for autopilot purposes. It's still the nudging and that's all it is, but to improve the autopilot system. So I don't know what they do with it. Maybe they want to try something in shadow mode and see how the driver is currently reacting and how lazy the driver is in reacting and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. But yeah, it's not autopilot monitoring or active autopilot monitoring at this point in time. It's just to monitor data, and the data might be sent to HQ anonymized. So they will never link it to your VIN number. So they are clear of privacy issues, basically. And yes, we have to believe Tesla on their word that they will actually not do that, blah, blah, blah. But rest assured, from privacy, especially from Europe, they will have a GDPR commission that will actually go over that and verify that the data is actually anonymized. So yeah, indeed, it is a small improvement if we get the unconfirmed lane change, but it's still an improvement. I think it's a very welcome improvement because it takes away, in my opinion, it takes away a lot of the problems. So if you go back to the chart here, we have this 3 to 5 second window where we have to judge whether our car will fit in the gap that we spot. Because as I mentioned in that first video, and I will put the link in the description afterwards to the first video, but you can find it on the channel. It's the video of September 2019, where I explain the regulation. And there's a formula that says if you are driving 120 kilometers an hour, sorry, 110, there's a car coming from behind you, 120, and you want to merge into that lane, then you have to be, or you have to have a gap of, I believe it was like 35 meters behind you. But the problem is, in reality, in busy countries like Belgium, you hardly ever get that specific range. So a lot of the time, you have to either judge it really well, that the timing is right, because for 1 second it can't move, and between 3 and 5 seconds it needs to cross that line. So you learn to play with it a little bit, but if the system can initiate it, then it can judge the distance a lot better than we as humans can do. So I think it will take away a lot of the interruptions, a lot of the being jerked back into your lane thing. And I think it would be a big improvement instead of just a small improvement if we can get the unconfirmed lane change. The only thing that I hate when I'm driving on navigate on autopilot is that on each on-ramp, the car is moving over the lane. I get why they are doing that, because then you don't hinder the oncoming traffic that comes from the on-ramp and they have free reign. But often when it's busy, the car would try to merge, and you just need to stay in your lane and leave a little bit more room, and they can just merge in as well. So that is something, or even on an empty highway, right? It just 200-300 meters up front, it just wants to move to the middle lane. So I never do that. And with Navigate on Autopilot in Europe, you have to actually acknowledge it, so we can ignore it for now. But I can only imagine if with an unconfirmed lane change, how often you would just weave in and out with all the exits that are very close to each other within a few kilometers or within a few miles of each other on our Belgian highway roads. It would be better in Germany, for example, where you have huge stretches of nothing between on-ramps. But in Belgium and the Netherlands and Luxembourg and all the small countries, it would not be very interesting to do, or to let unconfirmed lane change do its thing just all the time. Let's see, what else do we have here? Maybe allow FSD level 4 geofenced on highway roads only first, and expand to more difficult areas when capabilities improve. Well, that is actually what you're saying is actually level 3. So it is, in certain conditions, you can take your hands off the wheel and do whatever you want. And of course, when you exit the highway, you need to be able to take over instantly at that point, or within the 8 to 10 seconds that Stefan mentioned before. So that there's a period of transfer between the machine and between the human. But you need to be in the seat for that. You need to be in the driver's seat. So that is just level 3. Level 4 is really where you can already go to sleep in the back and say, okay, I have highways to do for 800 kilometers. Just go ahead, do your thing. And it would actually drive off the highway onto city streets. So I don't think we can do level 4 just on highways alone. But I could be mistaken. Maybe they find a way to do that. Stefan, level 4 is not legal anywhere in the world. That's actually incorrect. Some time ago, I will also try to link it below in the description afterwards. But some time ago, I did a video that level 4 actually has regulations within Germany also. But those regulations are really, really tight. I did an interview, live stream with that, or on that, with Alex Voigt, who is a famous German blogger and vlogger. So we talked about it that way, and there were huge restrictions. So it was more meant for driving around in the harbor or for taxis in the city center, so where you really have busy traffic. So that was surprising, but really geofenced to a very limited area, where they can probably base it on high definition maps. They can probably base it on LiDAR, where you can have that local maximum and really quickly learn the city inside and out in that way. But again, if you have quickly changing conditions, the car needs to be able to react to that on a level 4. And that is making it hard because there are a gazillion conditions that you need to be able to react to. So level 4 you can sleep as well. Yes, that is correct. But with level 4 on highways, if you do only level 4 on highways, then you need to have that transition period again where you are exiting the highway and you need to take over. So I was kind of referring to that. But yes, level 4 is fully autonomous. You can sit in the back seat, you can sleep, you can work, you can do whatever. And the car can take you almost anywhere in almost any condition. So it might not work when it's snowing. Level 5 would work when it's snowing as well. So that is one of the differences there. Yes, auto lane change makes my wife sick. Sometimes, I remember when we went to Croatia once and the car was really doing the lane changes like Formula 1 style, like really quickly. And indeed, my wife was complaining like, are you driving like a nutcase or is the car doing that? Luckily it was the car, so I was vindicated, but yeah, it was not pleasant and I didn't use it for the rest of the trip after that. Right, so potentially unconfirmed lane change by June approved within the UNECE General WP 29. So that's the working party 29. Again, if it takes another 18 months, like it has with the level 3 approval, type approval, then yeah, we won't be seeing any of that this year and maybe next year. Or because now we have a first precedence, basically, of getting that type approval ready. Everybody knows now how to do it, which forms, which formula, and the new regulations, the new changes are also taking that type approval into account, and they are more and more documenting the type approval system as well, or procedure. It might go this year that we get unconfirmed lane change. What is still open? What are they still debating about? So requirements for the lane change capability higher than 60 kilometers an hour. So unconfirmed lane change and the level 3 autonomous driving, they kind of go hand in hand, but they don't need to. So Germany was just clear about that upfront, and they even mentioned it in their original documents, like, okay, we would like to see this implemented at the same time, but it's not really necessary. So that's why at the moment, unconfirmed lane change is not allowed. It just, the level 3 highway driving just needs to stay in a single lane. Of course, that can be boring depending on the traffic. But of course, you also are stuck in a traffic jam at that point, so there's no real need for a lane change at that point. If you move it up to 130 kilometers an hour, then I think it is really necessary to get that unconfirmed lane change at the same time to be able to pass slower cars or trucks on the highway. And of course, that needs to happen safely. So yeah, we don't have snow here. How does Tesla Vision see lines when they are covered? Well, yeah, it doesn't. And at the moment, the dangerous part there is if you have only light snow and you drive through it, you create tracks with your tires. And if enough cars are doing that on the highway, and if enough cars are taking a certain exit, it thinks the snow that is remaining between the tires are actually lane markings. So it will just jump out of a lane to take an exit when you don't really want to. So that is why it's still a level 2 and not a level 4 or even a level 5 system. Yeah, the same way a human manages it? No, unfortunately not. I wish it would, but yeah, the thing that I always have with vision-only computers and what a human does is we have a lot of experience. That's one thing. Well, AI can quickly gain a lot of experience given the correct data. So the first data is going to be difficult, it's going to be really slow, but once it has a basic set of data, it has a basic training, it will surpass human capabilities a lot faster. And it will go really fast. So that is the AI advantage that you have. But on the other hand, humans are very good on estimating situations, estimating what other people might do, while a system will always be, let me say, mostly be reactive, but it can start calculating, well, what is the path of that car? Will it slow down? Is it slowing down when it's coming from a side street, for example? But you as a human are looking at the driver and you're looking at the driver's face. Has he seen me? Yes or no? Or is he just looking the other way and he might just jump in the street? That is what a human does as a driver. We pay attention to so many details. We pay attention to, hey, there are a few poles on the side of the road, and 3 miles ago, those poles were 2 meters from the edge of the road. So by knowing the poles, I know exactly where the edge of the road is if I am in a snow-covered situation, for example. That is something that I think is really going to be difficult for an AI system or for a computer system in general. And I don't know how they will fix it, but if a human can learn it, then probably a computer can learn it as well. Does removal of radar mean anything in the EU? Probably the whole autopilot system will need a type approval again, and maybe that is why it has taken so long for the radar to be removed in Europe. I don't know on my car. I have asked the service guy who came along if there's still a radar on my car, and he didn't know the answer either. So yeah, I really want to find out if my Model Y from China, which is now only a month old, not even, I got it on the 1st of March. So I don't know if that still has the radar, yes or no. So if anybody knows how I can check it quickly, if it still has a radar, let me know without destroying the car or trying to unmount a lot of things in the front. But anyway, so yeah, does it mean anything? Probably type approval. I don't think there will be any issues because it has been proven in the US that the system is just as reliable. It just needs to go through those tests again. Do you see any regulation proposals making the case for LiDAR as a redundancy? I don't know about the LiDAR itself. What I have been saying for quite some time is that I don't believe that we will get to true full self-driving. So not the FSD beta that we are seeing, basically level 2, but basically the level 4 that we all want. I don't see that happening within or with the current hardware suite. There is no redundancy in the side view cameras, for example. LiDAR could maybe fix that. I don't know if the ultrasonic sensors are enough to temporarily fill that gap of the redundancy. That is something that the regulators will have to decide. But yeah, I think we will need some additional hardware, additional cameras, or other systems that will take over from the cameras to be able to get to the true FSD, which is really full self-driving. Martin, thank you very much. I'm happy to oblige, but small comment. The name is Steven, not Peter, but you're not the only one that says that. I've been called Peter so many times that I also just react to it just like anyone else. So as a biker, even if the driver looks straight at you, they may still try and hit you. Yeah, but that's just because they're playing Carmageddon, right? No, it is true that it doesn't always mean something that if they see you that they will actually stop. They may think they have right of way, they may just take their right of way. You always have to pay attention as a driver, and that makes it difficult. That's why we need to pass our driver's test, because it's not just simple, just push the pedal and steer a little bit and that's it. There's a lot of things that you need to learn. And of course, with a lot of driving experience and a lot of experience driving in dangerous situations and encountering them, you learn a lot, and hopefully without any actual accidents, of course. Stefan, FSD is ADAS, so that's an advanced driver assist system in the US according to Tesla and regulators. Yes. How can you make the case that type approval in the EU for level 3 using a level 2 system? As I said, it's all about responsibility, and FSD beta is, I believe, 70-80% the way of what is necessary to get to level 4. It's really good. We have been seeing in the past year, we have been seeing a lot of improvements, a lot of corner cases being tested by the YouTubers that are testing it. So they are doing mostly a good job on that. Sometimes I wish I could just give them a whole bunch of scenarios like try this, do that, find this, because those are situations that we encounter, but unfortunately it's not always possible there. But if Tesla feels confident enough that we can take our hands off the steering wheel and they say, okay, we take responsibility, then I don't see any problem with FSD being a level 3 system. The reason why it is level 2 in the US is kind of the same as what we have in Europe. There is not yet a regulation for level 3, and nobody wants to take the responsibility at this point of doing that level 3. And that's also what Elon said. They were looking to the regulators for level 3 and above. That is something that he said on Autonomy Day, I think, or on any of the presentations that he did. I can't remember exactly which one. I think it was Autonomy Day, that we are still at level 2, but for level 3 and higher, they will also look to the regulators to make sure that they need to cover their asses as well, right? And just, it's different to say, okay, we have a system that is very capable, but you are still responsible for everything, compared to, well, we will take full responsibility if anything happens. Then you have to be really sure, and it has to be tested in such a way. So I think, yeah, with FSD beta, with a wider rollout, they might move to level 3 in the US as well. It might be a little bit different. So it means for FSD we paid 7,500 euros for something that will never work, or have to add a few thousand to add LiDAR interior camera. It's a good question. Tesla has always clearly stated that it is only after regulatory approval and after software validation that it would work. What they have already done is they have retrofitted for free the hardware 3 computer, so the FSD computer, and on that level, they might have to put a new interior camera on older FSD cars, like my old P100D didn't have the interior camera, so it would need a retrofit on that, probably. Or they might pay you back for a little bit. But yeah, the question is, what Tesla means with FSD is not the true level 4 FSD that we all expect for it. So they are using the term a little bit lightly. But on the other hand, if you see what they are currently doing with FSD beta, I think a lot of people will have the best use case for that kind of system. Like in most cases, it can drive me to work, no problem. It can drive me to the shop, no problem. But I still need to be physically in the car somehow, and I need to be able to take over every now and then. That would already make traveling a lot more relaxed. If you really want to go to sleep, then I think we need more redundant systems, or the car just needs to pull over and wake you up somehow to say, okay, driver, now it's time for you to take over because I can't do it anymore. My sensor is blocked. I have a failure in that system or whatever. So yeah, There's true FSD level 4, level 5, as it is according to the SAE levels. I don't think we will have it with the current hardware. And Elon was already talking about hardware 4 being developed. I don't know if it's just going to be a chip increase or if it's going to be additional cameras. I seem to remember something about newer cameras with higher refresh rates and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that might still be a retrofit to the cars that paid for the FSD. A full wiring harness with additional sensors, I doubt they will retrofit that. Okay, so about may have asked before, but if you're getting a new Tesla in about a year, would you take the FSD option? I took the FSD option on my Model S Plaid, which I will get probably in about a year, who knows. And I didn't take the option on the Model Y. There are a couple of reasons why. First of all, my Model Y is a temporary car, so it's an expensive option, especially with FSD only meaning traffic light recognition, stop sign recognition at the moment. So this is something that I didn't think was worth the money. I'm currently driving on the very basic autopilot because I just want to test it. But I most likely will update to the enhanced autopilot, even if I just have the car for about 6 months or so, because I'm so used to the auto lane change. I find it useful even within its restrictions. The auto park function, I don't care about summon, it's just a party trick. It's nice to show to some friends, but it doesn't really do what it is supposed to do or what it is doing in the US, due to regulations, of course. So I will do the enhanced autopilot, not FSD. What I would love to be able to do is get into the subscription, because I don't plan to keep the car for long. And a subscription would be a lot better for me to pay a couple of €100 instead of 3,800 euros for the enhanced autopilot. And the same with the Model S, instead of paying 10,000 euros each and every time, or 7.5. It's expensive if you switch cars and you don't get what you pay for, right? But it's the price that you pay for. With the Model S, the P100D, I was still gambling. Right now, I don't recommend anyone buying the FSD unless you absolutely want the traffic light recognition, the stop sign, and any new features that you may like that may come out. But we don't know when. And you can always jump in later, potentially at a higher price, or potentially at a little bit of a discount, like they did with FSD a few years ago, where you could get it really cheap. So I would wait with buying FSD, but I would still go for the enhanced autopilot at this point. What else do we have here? The power envelope is usually the same with newer computer modules. GPUs are always the same, but performance increases. I seem to remember that when talking about hardware 4 or talking about another chip that they were doing, definitely that's something in the pipeline, that would reduce it actually. So it would be better in performance, but still reduce the power consumption. Again, in an attempt to get the vampire drain to 0 and increase the range of the car, because apparently, if you do that and you run it at 250 to 350 watts the whole time you're driving, eventually that is counting up to some usage. Stefan, I agree. They have an issue with crap hardware and a lot of promises. I don't think the hardware 3 is crap hardware. It's doing the job and it still has some headroom of doing the job. It's the software that is not doing what it is supposed to do, for one part, but for the other part, it's the regulations that are restricting the system so badly that it is creating dangerous situations on the road. Traffic lights suck at the moment, to be honest. Yes, especially in Belgium, where we have, I don't know, I think in most European countries, you have these traffic lights where you have a single light with an arrow for each lane. And sometimes it thinks when the light goes green for the lane next to me, it's like, ping, hey, you can go. So that was happening with my P100D, where I did have the FSD functionality. So FSD beta, if running on hardware 4, there is no hardware 4 at the moment. And when FSD beta is coming, that's up to the regulators. And I think they are not going to be related because current FSD beta is running on hardware 3 in the US. So there's no need for the current FSD beta to have a new hardware suite. Oh yeah, I had to disable traffic light recognition since the car wanted to stop at every tunnel entrance on the highway. Yes, it has gotten worse in the last couple of updates where overhead signs with just green arrows, yeah, like you can use this lane but not that lane, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it thinks it's traffic lights, but only in certain conditions or certain locations even. So it's really weird that a similar situation is apparently different enough to not react to it, and in some cases it just stops for it. But yeah, that has gotten worse in the past few updates. It was a lot better at the end of 2021. Exactly. Oh really? Hardware 4 maybe in test at the moment, not in production. Okay. Any link you can provide to that statement? I haven't read about anything actually being tested at the moment. I know there were talks about it, but actual tests, I have not read or heard anything about it, but I can't see anything on Twitter, of course, or everything, I should say. Yeah, again, I agree for now, buy extended autopilot, not FSD if getting a new Tesla. I think that's the best value for money that you're going to get. And when reselling the car, it will actually give you some money. FSD as additional option is costing you 3.7k euro, something like that. And you're not going to get that back because it doesn't really mean anything at the moment. If you sell the car by the time that you can have level 3, for example, or you can have a basic level 4 system, highway only, whatever they cock up, then maybe it will be worth something. But in resale value, FSD is more something, if you buy it, you are a believer, you are in it for the long run, and you want to lock in your price, because as soon as the UNECE is going to allow something else, it will increase the price in Europe as well as it has done in the US. Do you think we'll get at least the FSD visualizations? Yeah, it's been a couple of months since Elon promised that. Maybe that is something that we could get. I don't know for sure how easy it would be to separate the two, because it's a different code base that is behind it. I don't know if the visualizations are tied into the actual FSD functionality, or if they need to reprogram it to work on autopilot and just do the visualization but not react to it. It's a good question. I hope so, because I would really like to see that. And Elon has said that it would come, but we all know Elon. He does deliver, but it takes some time to deliver it. But people on Twitter are constantly asking about it. Can we get it? What are we getting in March? You promised something early 2022. What are we getting? But so far, Elon has not reacted, unfortunately. But still, one can hope, of course. Okay, so Green, he only saw some code in a recent update with IDs for new. Okay, yeah. He has spotted a lot of new things in the code as well, way before it was actually released. Like the new colors, for example. I think in Berlin, he also read a code about paint colors, if I remember correctly. But they are not there yet. So yeah, they are foreseeing something there. Waypoints took a while. Yeah, it took a while. And for me personally, I don't ever use them. So I didn't really miss it at all. A lot of people apparently have a use case for it. I never really had a use case for it. So for me, it didn't really matter. But finally, you can be happy. Waypoints are here. Woo! Tesla says 10 times safer than human is enough. Well, Tesla says many things. It's the regulators that need to dictate or need to agree on what is safe enough to have. And then we're talking about level 4 full autonomy. And they're not really debating that at the moment. They're still working on level 2, level 3. So yeah, I would say personally, my gut feeling would be, even if it's 2 times safer, I would already have it implemented. Oh yeah, something I remember all of a sudden, what I was reading through the documents is some are actually proposing to have a specific driver's license for autonomous vehicles. I don't know if it's like with automatic gearboxes, where you can't drive a stick shift when you have a license for an automatic gearbox, but you can do it the other way around. Maybe for autonomous vehicles, you can't drive a car yourself, but you can own one to be driven around, something like that. Or, and I think it was more going in that direction, it's kind of a test driver license that you know the system and you have to prove that you know that system to be able to use that. But I think that would be very difficult to implement because, well, in the end, if you buy a new car, you don't want to get a new driver's license. So I don't think that will go anywhere, but I read it somewhere in the documents in between the gazillion lines of text that somebody proposed that, and it was kind of the same reaction that was already mentioned there. It's going to be difficult to implement something like that, but yeah, people are talking about it and thinking about such things to get a separate driver's license for an autonomous car. Any thoughts on data sources for speed limits, submitting corrections to TomTom, OpenStreetMap? Some were thinking that it was OpenStreetMap, that they changed a few things. You can register to there, you can make corrections. But I looked at OpenStreetMap on several parts where it actually worked or worked wrong according to the speed limit, and the speed limit was right on OpenStreetMap. I actually corrected one, I think already a year ago, and it never got corrected in since the new, or no, not a year, yeah, close to a year ago. It never corrected to the correct speed limit. So I don't think that OpenStreetMap is behind it. I don't know what is. It used to be Engix, I think, that was behind it. But when they switched to Valhalla with Mabox, with their own navigation system on top of it, I think they also switched drivers or speed limit sign databases. And yeah, with the last update, it got really, really bad. And I've been asking around. There is no real way to actually get that data. Some have tried via the, was it navigation beta at tesla.com? They actually publicized that email address when they had the new navigation maps to get some feedback, but I haven't heard of anybody successfully changing a wrong speed limit. Yeah, I already have trouble figuring out what the speed limit is somewhere. I've never been in Belgium, but true. Belgium is a specific case. We have speed signs every 50 meters. And we also have the lack of speed signs, which means we go to a default speed as soon as you cross an intersection. So there are a lot of circumstantial assumptions that you need to make when driving. But yeah, I think Tesla could take an easy approach and say, okay, I just remembered the last speed sign that I read and just keep that in mind. But again, it should not read the speed signs that are at the back of tractors where it thinks you can only do 25. Or it should not read on a roundabout the speed sign of the side street that you're not taking, but you're still on the main street. And then the car thinks it can only do 30 kilometers an hour, for example. It's difficult. Or when there's a truck parked next to you, or it's just a parked truck and the sign is obfuscated, then it can also not read it. So it needs a combination of visual and database, but I think the visual should be a primary source and the database should be the backup. And right now it seems like the database is primary and the visual is just visualization. And that's it. They should use race speed limits. Yeah, I don't think that Tesla is going to pay for the license to be able to use Waze. It's just not the way that Tesla works. They want to do everything themselves. They want to have full control, which is beneficial in most cases, but in other cases, like here, they should use whatever already exists and is known to be good data and known to be updatable data. So yeah. When talking the smart summon, could you please comment the capabilities of the Volkswagen ID version 3 and their function to remember maneuvering steps? Is this still 20 meters limited? I have not tested it, but yes. It's not Tesla specific, that regulation. It is still 20 meters limited, but the difference might be if you can note that it's on private property, it might be a little bit different. I don't know. But in any case, the legislation talks about remote control procedures. And this is a remote control procedure where the car is doing a certain maneuver and it remembered it, but it is remotely controlled. You will also probably, I don't know, I haven't tested it yet. I have a couple of colleagues that have the ID4. I don't know if they have the functionality or the option selected to do that, but I think you still need to press a key or press your phone and keep it pressed while activating it. So yeah, I think the regulation there still is on the same level and it's talking about the same thing. So there will be the limit most likely, but it's a good one. I will note it down after this live stream, and I will see if I can get a colleague to verify this. Tesla is lying to sell. Well, I don't agree with that. They're always very clear about what FSD is and what it isn't. They are always clear. If I talk to a salesperson, there is not a single salesperson in Belgium that will actually say, okay, you need to buy FSD, right? So they're not lying, they're not upselling, but they are forthcoming about, okay, if you want to keep the car for a long time, it's good to have it because it will be more expensive in the future. And they're not lying about that. So yeah, I disagree on that one. All right. Try having your Tesla navigation speak in Irish and English at the same time in random words. Yeah, sometimes the language. I try to have the voice recognition in Dutch. I have my whole system in everything that is computer related for me is in English because I hate the translations that are often so wrong and I never find anything back again. So my entire computer, my Tesla, it's all in English. But I try to have the voice recognition in Dutch because, well, if I want to call my wife or other people with a Dutch name, at least it recognizes it. My Audi that I had before the Tesla, like 7-8 years ago, was very good at being in English, but still recognizing Dutch names. And that is something that Tesla does not do very well. So it's really stuck to the language. So that's why I do it. But some what are for me very basic instructions that I would like to do, I have to think about what would this be called in Dutch. So I should actually look up like the whole translation sheet, which are the Dutch versions of the commands that I can give. Yeah. Oh yeah, the pronunciation of German street names in English is terrible to the point of being hilarious. Oh yeah, it's the same if you have the navigation in Dutch. Sometimes the Dutch street names, even if you get some longer street names, or you go to Brussels and you already get some French street names, it makes no sense anymore. And it's very hard to understand. So usually I shut up the navigation and I just look at it on the screen because of that particular issue. All right. Any more questions? I think I'm going to wrap it up here. We have been at it for an hour and 20 minutes already. So that's quite a long time. I was hoping to wrap it up in about half an hour to 45 minutes. But I love the interaction that I had with you guys. Thank you so much for this interactivity. It means a lot to me that you guys are also involved in this and pushing towards this, being part of the Tesla family, pushing towards EVs for a future and towards FSD. I wish we could do more as drivers to push the regulators. I think I've exhausted all my options here, trying to contact the people at the government, trying to contact the people at the UNECE. They know about the petition already 2-3 years ago that we made. It was almost instantly that we did it after that 2019 release in June. So they know about it, but we cannot exert enough pressure. What I do see, and I want to wrap up with that, is that Tesla is actively participating in it. We can see the comments from Tesla people that I know in the UNECE documents, actively trying to shape the future of this autonomous driving, be it level 2 all the way up to level 5, probably in the future. They are actively doing it. There are associations that are gathering data from different automakers, from Mercedes, from BMW, from Nissan with their ProPilot, which is also a very good system, from Tesla. They're bundling that. They are advocating that. So everybody that has some advantage to it is pushing in that direction. I just wish that as drivers we could do a little bit more to put some pressure on the regulators to move things forward. And with that, I'm going to leave you guys. Thank you very much for attending. And as usual, see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.